Listen, this is Jack Antonio for Do You Know Jack, the podcast, talking at you live, at least for now, from the sun-drenched shores of the North Saskatchewan River right here in scenic Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And of course, the man, the myth, the bass legend himself, David Ellefson, on the line with me today. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm good, Jack. How are you, man?
Well, I'm about as good as I can be. I mean, normally at this time of year, we'd probably be, covering various different shows that, come through Saskatoon and the surrounding area. But of course, given the circumstances we're in, we're all sort of stranded here at home.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you're in the northern hemisphere and me down here in Arizona. It's almost like I'm in the southern hemisphere compared to how the distance between us. But yeah, it's funny as you called. I was actually just processing some coffee orders for my Ellefson Coffee Company.
Right.
Through the summer, I'm autographing all the bags and I'm actually stuffing the envelopes myself, and which is fun. We started the company and then I went right on tour and we grew really quickly, and we're out at a bunch of the festivals here in America and doing stuff over in the UK. And so it's fun for me to just kind of roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty with my own company.
Yeah.
And, it's cool. It's a way to kind of look through see if there's any cracks, see where things are slipping through, as, things tend to. And so it's just kind of fun to tighten that up. And of course we just got done, recording and now mixing the Ellefson No Cover album. So I got to be honest with you, I've been pretty darn busy during the shutdown. In fact, the shutdown, quite honestly, has probably been good for me to be at home and kind of have my feet planted so I can, be productive on some other fronts. So I'm actually not complaining.
Well, it's given a lot of people a chance to maybe catch up on things that maybe normally they wouldn't have time to. Like, for instance, I figured out how to do video interviews during the shutdown because, of course, I'm not as busy out covering shows and whatnot. So, I got that going for me now, and it sounds like you've had some time to work out some things yourself, both from the business perspective and, of course, the No Cover record, which comes out on Combat Records October 2nd. Congratulations on that, man. That's a pretty cool project you got going there.
Yeah, thank you. And, it's kind of interesting, as life tends to have a way of doing. We were planning to put out a record of an Ellefson solo band, a record of mostly all original material.
Right.
And we had pushed out a track called Simple Truth back in April.
That's true.
And then we pushed out a cover of the Post Malone song Over Now. And we kept those in the schedule because originally we were going to be going to Japan and Australia. Now that's, of course, all pushed back, until next year.
Right.
But so as we were aiming toward putting out a record of original material in October, Tom Hazard, my singer and my business partner, we just looked at it and we went, there's no reason to put out a record and then not be able to be on tour and promote it. So why don't we do a covers record? And we initially thought maybe it might be a couple of songs, maybe it's an EP. And I mean, within a day or two, we literally had 10 to 12 songs picked out.
Yeah.
And then it turned into, I think now we're at like 18 songs. So essentially a double album probably of material. And it's been so fun. And the other thing that's been really cool about it is it really, quite honestly, it set the bar even higher now for our next record, which will be the original material. And we're now this week going back in and listening to that and just realizing, going, man, after we did these covers, these are songs that all of us grew up on in our formative years. Everything as far back as Bachman Turner Overdrive, which is the band that got me into this whole thing. All the Canadians there.
Yeah, for sure.
And Nazareth, and things as far back as that, and then also some more recent things like Fastway and Wasp, which were coming out, on the radio right as I had moved to Los Angeles in 1983. And those were tracks that set a tone for the 80s, which was when my career with Megadeth was getting started. So we've got this pretty wide variety of material. And I think digging into these songs, you realize there's a reason these songs like, Rebel Yell and things like that, you realize what made them so great. Oftentimes it's their simplicity,
Right. Yeah.
and other times it's just, look, it's a simple beat, it's a great melody, and it's a hooky riff. And those, as simple as that seems, those are not easy to write. And there's obviously only the select few that do, and that's why they're superstars. And so I think this cover record, in a lot of ways, got our studio ears on, got our musical ears on to start looking at our own record and much more critical, and really starting to, kind of hold our own material to a higher standard, which was great. I'm actually glad it worked out that way. So we kind of got an extra blessing in disguise by putting this cover record out first.
For sure. Well, you know what I've noticed now, just, scanning down the track list, I mean, there was a lot to unpack in what you just said, but I mean, you've chosen songs that are challenging from a, guitar and bass front, but you've also chosen songs that are extremely challenging from a vocal perspective. Like, for instance, you mentioned that 1983 era. I remember Defenders of the Faith was coming out right around that time, and Freewheel Burnin', that's one of Halford's more upper register songs. It had to have challenged Tom quite a bit, and same with Love Hurts by Nazareth. It's up there in the stratosphere as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's. I used to sing all the time when I was in my bands growing up, and then my voice dropped. My voice changed when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
and it became harder for me to sing lead, and my voice. I found I became a really good background singer, which is why I always jump into what I call the Michael Anthony, from Van Halen. Always had this great harmonizing voice, And so I tended to always be the guy to grab those harmony bits. And you're right. I mean, doing songs like Sheer Heart Attack, which have these just super smooth, slick, layered harmonies. And it's fortunately we've got a lot of good friends in our wheelhouse, like Bumblefoot, who we can go to. And same with, Brandon from Crowbots, and there's just, there's just these great guys out there. And of course, Mark Slaughter, we had him join in on the Fast Away song, because it's a very upper register song.
Right.
And we all grew up on these tunes. These are all songs that are in our record collection. And it's cool to have guys. Obviously, I'm probably one of the older, me, Charlie Benante, Dave Lombardo, we're probably the elder statesmen, I guess, of this record. And then you've got guys, like, Jacob, who sings with Mick Mars's band, and Brandon from Crowbot, and, these younger guys jumping in. So there's a very wide spread, and everything in between, Doro, Tom Hazard, Bumblefoot, guys, Andy Martin-Jelly, my main guitar player, he's, kind of in the middle of the spectrum. But it's so funny how these songs resonate with all of us. We're fans of all of them. We all have them in our record collection, regardless of our age. And I think it just goes to show the impact of these songs and why they stood the test of time.
For sure. You mentioned Doro too, and I mean, she's in on a few, one of which is Love Me Like a Reptile, which is, a Motorhead track. And right. You've got Greg and Chuck, formerly of Megadeth fame. I mean, I know you didn't have those guys, with you in the studio, but it must have been quite a treat to be working with them, at least in some musical form.
Well, it was. Love Me Like a Reptile has a very special place in this record, because I called my dear friend Greg Handovit, who is now a lawyer, an attorney in Minnesota. And he and I grew up together in bands since 6th grade. We've been friends, maybe even 5th grade, actually. I think 5th grade. And we met over our love of Kiss and rock and roll. And then I was starting to play bass, and he took up guitar. We formed bands. We moved to LA together, and he and I, along with Dave, are the founding members of Megadeth.
That's right.
In fact, it was Greg's idea to call the band Megadeth.
Oh, wow.
So, and then, he was only in the band with us for a couple of months, and then, we went our separate ways. But Greg is, truly, one of my best friends. And, so when we're doing this record, and we didn't want to do the obvious, Ace of Spades, Breaking the Law, Cold Gin, kind of the bar standards. We didn't want to do that. We wanted this to be something that, like, and songs that just, again, resonated with us. So we wanted there to be an honesty about this record, that these were songs that really did impact us. And so me and Greg used to play Love Me Like a Reptile literally at high school dances, you know.
Yeah.
We had a set list that had like Eddie Money and 38 Special and all these kind of, you know, mainstream, you know, top 40 songs on it. And then we'd come in and we'd say, you know, then we'd start playing Love Me Like a Reptile instead, you know, and Iron Maiden, Killers, and Wrathchild. And they'd be looking at us like, wait a minute, the band we hired said they played these songs. We went, yeah, we changed our mind. We don't play those. Now we play Love Me Like a Reptile. So it was, it's funny, you know, because we were metalheads, you know?
Yeah.
And so we had one set list to get hired and then another one to get fired, you know? And so for me and Greg, it was great to have him sing and play on that. And then, of course, Chuck Beeler was in Megadeth in 1988 on the So Far So Good So What tour when we had Warlock on tour with us, which, of course, is Doro Pesch. That was Doro's band. So, and Doro was dear friends with Lemmy, and she loved that song. Like when we told her, we said, look, this is the song. She goes, oh, my God, great choice. And you know, Doro's so badass and she's so rock and roll. And I think only Doro could sing that lyric like that because it's so Motorhead and it's so Lemmy. You know, it's just a good, raunchy, dirty lyric. And God bless Doro. You know, she's not afraid of anything. She'll just jump in and go. And so that song really brings together a lot of my friends and throughout my history of my entire lifetime is really kind of centered right in that song.
Yeah. Well, now you guys, you know, I'm talking about Lemmy. You guys famously were in The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, which, you know, by sheer happenstance and coincidence, I was literally just watching a couple of nights ago before we even thought about, you know, booking this interview. I mean, I honestly have always liked how, you know, Megadeth seems like, you know, here's the new kids coming along. Here's the new guys. Like something's changing in LA. We don't quite know what it is yet. The thrash movement was sort of just getting going. I mean, do you remember that time period specifically and working with Penelope Spheris at all?
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, the first movie we did with Penelope, she did a movie called Dudes it had Flea and John Cryer in it and Lee Ving. And she had asked us to redo a version of These Boots Are Made for Walking by Nancy Sinatra, which is a cover Megadeth had already done. So we went in and we recut it. It was actually the last song that we recorded with that lineup of the Peace Selves lineup, and then she invited us to be part of this film, The Decline of Western Civilization, the Metal Years, because she'd had a previous one. And now this was part 2, the Metal Years, and then we had her direct the video for the song In My Darkest Hour, which was also featured in the film. So it was really a perfect moment for us and Penelope. And she then did even the No More Mr. Nice Guy video a couple years later in 1989. So, yeah, we had a nice little history there with Penelope. And she got Megadeth. She understood Dave. There was a real, you know, Megadeth is not only a metal band, but there's as much punk rock roots to us. And I think the people in our earlier days, you know, our booking agent, Andy Summers, you know, who, you know, was into punk rock and booked Social Distortion and was Green Day's first agent and stuff like this. Like he understood that there was more to Megadeth than just this thunderous heavy metal band. Like we had these kind of jazz influence from the first lineup. There was this punk rock thing that me and Dave had. There was this metal thing. So, you know, Megadeth, what set us apart probably inside just the big four was this varied musical diversity and, you know, dare I say, pretty high level musicality. Yeah. Because we weren't just a metal band and we weren't just metal kids. You know, we had a lot more going on musically inside the band, and that just, I think, allowed us to play more notes even faster and with a lot of attitude, you know, because of the punk thing. And Penelope got that, you know, so
yeah, you guys are painted in a really positive light in that movie. I mean, you guys come off looking good, whereas maybe some of the other bands and groups, not even the mainstream ones that are in there, like Faster Pussycat or Poison or Aerosmith or even Kiss. But I mean, like, I'm talking about some of those independent bands. There's almost this comic kind of thing going on. But when you guys come on, it's like, you know, these guys are the real deal. They're about to take the bull by the horns if they haven't already.
Well, and I credit Dave for having that vision right from the beginning. You know, when I met him, I had just moved from Minnesota. All I'd heard about with all these famous clubs in the Sunset Strip and the Starwood and the whiskey and Dave had his experience with some of those clubs with Metallica.
Yeah.
And when I met Dave, he was only about 6 weeks out of Metallica, and he just said, he goes, "We are not debuting our new band in LA. We're going to go up to San Francisco, where the real metal scene is at," where he had just spent a couple years with Metallica. And he was right. And we went up there, and I mean, packed houses, no pay to play. We actually got paid. Our first gigs were sold out, and they actually paid us to play. In LA, you'd have to be walking around putting handbills on, on fucking, posts down Laurel Canyon, and somehow, blowing somebody to get a fucking stage time, and first of three, and at a Hollywood club, and you know what I mean. And Dave knew. He goes, "I am not doing that. I didn't have to do it once because of Metallica, and I'm not going to certainly do it now." You know what I mean? And so for me, it was like shocking. What do you mean we're not going to play the clubs? But he was right. I mean, as I hung in LA with them for another, year or so, another few months, I got it. When we went to San Francisco, I mean, we showed up as the reigning heroes, and of course, everybody was excited to see what Dave was going to do next. After Metallica, and so he was right. I mean, he's got good instincts on that stuff, and it believe me, it saved us. It saved us from being one of those comical bands in in that movie, because that's where a lot of them are. And look, they're just trying to get a name for themselves. They're doing anything they can to try to. They're trying to have an outrageous look, an outrageous attitude, just anything outrageous to just be noticed, and the ones where it actually works, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Wasp, the ones where it actually did work. I mean, again, you can count them on one hand out of all the bands that came out of that whole scene. And and you're right, the Decline of Western Civilization showed a lot of the other ones that they gave it their best shot, and their number didn't come up. And I'm very, very lucky that when we were doing that, that was our second record for Capitol Records. It was our third album of our discography, and we were, already an international, theater and civic center arena level band at that point. So we're very lucky that we were able to avoid all that chicanery in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, now, I would be remiss if I didn't really quickly mention that you guys have released a single off of No Cover, which comes out October 2nd. You chose Def Leppard's Wasted, which is more of a new wave of British heavy metal anthem than it is maybe some of the more glam, Mutt Lange type stuff that they released a little later. I mean, just to tell us a little bit really quick about your Def Leppard fandom and where they sort of fit into the picture when it comes to David Ellefson.
Sure. Well, that first record, On Through the Night, was a real game changer for me, because that was like I said, new wave of British heavy metal, and suddenly I was learning about Motorhead, first couple Iron Maiden records, Venom, Def Leppard, just hearing about Tigers of Pantang, Diamond Head, and when that On Through the Night record, they were very young. I think Rick Allen was only 16 years old. And, they made My Life Today look reachable and possible for me because of how young they were and that they were really in the game doing it. And the thing about the new wave of British heavy metal is that it wasn't all the pomp and, big hair and all the, sort of fantasy life rock stardom. It was just real music by real people. And they were immortalized because they were mortal. And that was just a very different approach. So when I moved to LA and I meet Dave, and he's very much a part of that scene with Metallica, and he knew he had played with some of these bands, Vandenberg, and had met Lemmy and Steve Harris, and and had performed in front of them when they were in the audience seeing Metallica. Like all of a sudden it was like, okay, I'm in that world now, and that was so cool. So yeah, for me, and Wasted is a song I used to play as a kid and in my bands back in the Midwest in Minnesota when I was growing up.
Right.
And so very much an influential band. I a few years, like, I don't know, 2007 and 8, I played bass for Ronnie Montrose.
Oh, wow.
And the first couple of shows we did were opening for Def Leppard. And they were big fans of Ronnie, and they opened their show with the sweet song Action. And it really spoke to me, their love of the glam rock thing, like especially Sweet, who are probably really one of the pioneers of the British, glam rock thing that they really liked. And it kind of explains, again, to Hysteria and some of the other big records that they had this very layered and elaborate sound to them. Yet their origins were this real stripped down new wave of British heavy metal, which I think metal kids like me liked. And it's weird because I don't think they play a lot of that stuff.
They've kind of shunned it over the years. Like, I know there's been interviews with Joe where he's basically sort of said, no, we weren't in that. But then, other people in the scene said, well, it was a very diverse scene. And, I would include, like, I remember talking to, John Gallagher of Raven, and he said, no,
right, John Gallagher from Raven.
Yeah, they were. He said Def Leppard definitely was in the scene. So, I mean, that's a matter of debate, I suppose. But I mean, here we are.
Yeah, I mean, look, they rose to the highest heights of global superstardom. So, yeah, why go back to your, beginnings? I mean, again, we've had the same thing. Killing Is My Business has become this cult classic, fan favorite record. And the truth of it is we only play a couple songs off of it.
Right.
We talked about going back and maybe playing all of it top to bottom. And I've brought it up a couple times and because I just know I see, I'm around the fans enough and then I'm engaged with our, social media and stuff. And I see like, boy, they would fucking lose their minds if we did that. So I get it. Yet, at the same time, again, we're working on album 16. So,
right.
We're moving forward, yet, there does come this moment that, our past is what got us to where we are. So, again, for me, playing Wasted is, look, the success that it's had just within the last 2 weeks since it's been released has, it's already doing great on the classic rock charts here in America. And
that's true.
Nights with Alice Cooper was kind enough to debut it for us. And so, I mean, there's a real affinity for that song and that era. So, I'm glad we went there because we certainly honor that era of Def Leppard and hold it very near and dear to us as a kind of a launching pad for my generation.
For sure. Well, listen, man, I think our time's up here. So I do really appreciate you chatting with me today. And, I'm looking forward to the record coming out in full October 2nd. Congratulations. Cool. And hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon.
Great. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah. Bye-bye.